Welcome to the Fighting on Film podcast, the podcast all about classic and obscure war movies, from the Normandy landings to the days of chivalry and swords. If it's been captured on film, we're going to try and cover it. I'm Robbie of RM Military History.
I'm Matthew Moss of Historical Firearms and the Armourer's Bench.
Welcome back to Fighting on Film, everyone. This week we are reviewing another brand new film, which came out on Friday, didn't it? Last Friday, if you're listening to
just
this.
On Friday.
Yeah, week of release, called The Forgotten Battle, which is a Dutch film.
I've been really excited about this one. The trailer came out what feels like maybe, a year ago now. And
was it pre-pandemic?
It may have been. If not, it was like just when the pandemic hit and we were all like just sat around hoping for something good to come on TV. And then this trailer emerged and we've been waiting ever since, like on tender hooks of when is it going to be released? It was supposed to be in 2020.
And it ramped and ramped, didn't it? Because I think it was coming out, then it was delayed. And then there was a Netflix trailer about, a week ago?
Yeah, so Netflix must have picked it up because I think it was originally just like a production company trailer.
And then that Netflix trailer hit like 4 million views or something stupid in a couple of days. Yeah, everyone was absolutely hyped for it. And it came out on the Friday and we obviously watched it like everyone else.
I did. I watched it the morning of release. I was like, yes, I'm on this. And I watched it before you did. You didn't get a chance.
Yeah, I was on daddy duty, so I had to do it in the evening.
Yeah.
I had very strong feelings on the Friday night. I mean, if anyone following me on my Twitter probably saw what I thought, but I've sort of mellowed a little bit now. I'm a bit more. I've got more.
We'll come back to like our opinions on it later on. But I think it elicited a lot of negative responses from people that are, very interested in World War II history, consider themselves, quite knowledgeable across social media, so on Facebook, so on Twitter. And I know where that came from. I know where they were coming from with that.
Yes.
But I also saw some positive reaction too from those people.
I think it's a mixed bag.
Yeah,
really.
it's your perspective on it, isn't it? I think with this film. Of
course it is, yeah.
So I suppose we better explain what the plot of the film is. This will be a spoiler review for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, by the way. We should mention that. So if you haven't seen it, definitely go and check it out and then perhaps come back and listen to our thoughts. Or
I'll leave a gap here, before we go in, just in case anyone wants to leave the room or whatever you're going to do.
Run a jingle, Rob.
There you go. That was your warning.
So the basic premise of the film is quite broad, actually. The feeling we got from the trailer was that it was going to be about the Battle of the Scheldt and the campaign to open up the Scheldt once Antwerp had been captured to Allied shipping. The film actually gets quite different. And it's not to say it isn't ambitious or a bad sort of approach to this story, but it's not what I personally expected. We follow 3 or 4 individual characters. We've got Marinus, who is a Dutch Wehrmacht soldier.
Yep.
I think he's a private. And we follow his story from the Eastern Front back to Holland. Then we have, apologies ahead of time for mispronouncing Dutch names, etc. But we have Toentje. I'm not sure how her name is pronounced. She's played by Susan Radda, or Radda. And she's a clerk at the local mayor's office in Zeeland. We follow her character with her brother, who is a member of the Resistance. And then we have a glider pilot regiment element, Tom Felton's character and Jamie Flatter's character, which we'll come back to when we talk about cast in a moment.
Yeah.
And they find themselves crash-landed near Walcheren. They have to sort of get through enemy lines and back to friendly forces. The film sees those plot lines converge.
Yes.
In various ways.
Very Dunkirk-esque in that regard, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very Nolan, especially with the time dilation.
Oh gosh, yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so it's really interesting that they've tried to be super ambitious. I suppose it's best described as like a trilingual, atmospheric, epic drama, I would say. They've gone for atmosphere. They've gone for multiple storylines interconnecting. It's very ambitious. And we'll talk a bit more later on about whether we think that works or not.
Yeah.
But do you want to go over the cast?
Yeah, I'll go through the cast a little bit more. So obviously Tom Felton, everyone probably will know him as playing Draco Malfoy in the Harry Potter series. It's sort of impossible to get away from that, I think. With
Oh, is that what he's from?
yeah. Because I wrote down in my notes, glider pilot regiment officer Malfoy, just so I knew who I was talking about.
But he plays Lieutenant Harry.
Yes.
Okay, that's the last Harry Potter joke.
Glider Bornhouse.
Oh,
that was dreadful.
2 house points off for that one.
So he plays Lieutenant Tony Turner. Jamie Flatters, who plays Sergeant William Sinclair, he was in ITV's Liar and a CBBC sitcom called So Awkward. Can't say I've seen either, because I don't actually think Liar's out at the time of recording. And he's going to be in the new Avatar films, apparently. And then Susan Radda, who played the Tinjay Visser, she's been in lots of Dutch series. She's probably quite well known in Holland.
She was quite good, actually. I quite liked her.
Yeah, she was good. She was really standout.
She did quite well in this, I think.
And then I'm probably going to absolutely butcher the name, but I think is it Gis Blum? Yeah, I'd say that. He plays Marinus van Staveren, and he was in Letter for the King, which is another Netflix release.
Ah, right, okay. And he's the German.
He's the German,
the Dutch German
Dutch German. Yeah.
We've got the doctor, Dr. Visser, who Jan Vivajet, I think it is. I know him from Into the Night, which is a Netflix series out of Belgium. It's sci-fi, and it follows sort of like an apocalypse, like solar flares, and they have to sort of escape the sun every day. And they're on a plane. It's actually an interesting premise, but he's actually really good in that. And I think in the film he's quite strong as well.
Yeah, he was. He really felt for his character at times. And then another name or a face that will be recognisable to English audiences at least is Theo Barklem-Biggs. And he plays John, a member of the glider pilot regiment in it. He also is going to play Reg Seekings in the SAS Rogue Hero series that the BBC are making. So that's the cast, really. I think everyone else is sort of ancillary, really. I don't think.
There's so much going on with this film that if you crammed any more actors in there, they really wouldn't have any time to breathe as characters. And then there are people that
come in and have a little bit to do, but because it's so small, they get lost. And the SS officer that Marinus meets,
yes,
and it's sort of like his arc's over in like 10 minutes, not even that.
Yeah.
What was the point in having him? If some of the people feel tacked on a little bit. And we'll probably get back into that. So quickly go through production before we do the Alitalia what have you. So production-wise, it was made by Levitate Film, and it was distributed by September Film over here. Then obviously, as we mentioned, picked up by Netflix for streaming rights, I guess. Directed by Matthijs van Heijningen. Sorry if we're getting these pronunciations wrong, doing our best. But he actually directed the Thing remake from 2011.
It's a prequel, apparently. I haven't seen it because I love the original. I love John Carpenter's original.
So the budget for this one was quite big for a European film. It was 14 million euros, which is the second most expensive Dutch film ever made, which is quite something for a war movie to get, isn't
it? I mean, it does
especially
show.
A European film. It does show, yeah. Principal photography in Lithuania. Some of it was filmed in England and Zealand itself too, so you get some nice on-location filming. Written by 6 writers, with the main credit given to Paula van der Oost, and she's just got lots of Dutch TV credits to her name.
Yeah, a lot of the production staff are have strong Dutch TV backgrounds, don't they? From what I've looked at on their list of credits, and it just seems that they bring a reliable quality.
Yes, they do.
To sort of
everyone who's on the film that I think is good at their craft. I think as a film, I don't think the production values aren't bad at all because they're there. It's just we will get into it later. We do have caveats, but it's the plot itself and elements within that plot that the movie falls down on. But obviously, but going back to the production side of it, they built the dam from scratch. Which is just, and they built sets from scratch too. So the mise en scène and the AD just looks really nice. The set design's great.
The mise en scène and the art direction, as you say, and the set very design is all pretty great.
The airfield scenes with the horses and the tug bombers and things like that. It just looks great.
It does. The Dutch houses, the Dutch town hall.
The Scheldt that's been flooded as well. It looks great.
The cinematography by Lynette Hillage is really good. Like there's bits where the camera sort of amongst the chaos of battle. There's bits where the characters fall when blast's gone off nearby, and the camera falls with them. I really like that. It gives it a really kinetic feel.
It's that same Ryan energy, isn't it?
That lovely sequence during the glider sequence, where it pans through the cockpit and it comes up through.
Yes, that is nice.
Through the middle of the fuselage and sort of like looks out the cockpit window, and it's just really striking.
Really nice. And then finally, there's a little fight on film connection. Well, threadbare really, but if you remember a few weeks ago, we talked to Charles Mains, the sound engineer, who's worked on lots of war films. He did additional audio work on this one, so it was nice to see his name pop up in the credits.
Yeah, it was. It was a nice surprise.
Really nice to see that. Yeah, as adding on to that, the audio is good.
Yeah, the sound design is pretty good. I don't think Charles was involved in the sound design element. I think he was doing some of the special effects. I think he was listed down as, which is obviously his speciality. The military advisors, I forgot to mention them a minute ago, were Dan Hurst, who's done Generation Kill. He was the military advisor on Red Tails, and Siege of Jadotville, which we've covered on the pod already.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
So that's good. I think the caveat with that is that he's a military advisor rather than a historical advisor, and I couldn't find anyone listed on the credits, the crew credits, as a historical advisor on this one.
No, I couldn't dig anything up either. But that is production really, because I think it's because it's such a brand new movie. There's just not a lot's been released yet that we could find really. I know that Woody did a chat with one of the production team a few months back.
I think he did, like a producer. I think it was.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
I think so. Yeah. So check out that for more if you haven't already. So shall we move on to the alley tally before we go to favourite scenes?
Yeah, there's quite a bit we can talk about, I think, this week, isn't there?
Yeah, I think there is.
It's time for Alley Tally on Fighting on Film.
We can't start without talking about the horses, can we, really?
True. There's a lot in this film, actually, and it's one of the strong points of the film.
It's quite a bit, yeah.
But yeah, you're right. The Horsa Glider is standout. The fact that they built a replica, like a half size replica, was super impressive. And that CGI in that sequence it
looks great. That's where the money's going, isn't it? That's where a lot of the money's going. It's a shame, and it's like a good thing and a bad thing. Obviously, because I think that scene is so well handled and looks really good. I don't know whether like the formations and thing isn't entirely 100% right, but how many times have we seen a lift in films lately? We've not seen a lift.
Not since Band of Brothers.
Not since Band of Brothers, maybe 20 years ago. Or a British lift. I mean, Christ, you'd have to go back to
Bridge Too Far.
Bridge Too Far for that, exactly. So that's really nice. Secondly, you've got Halifax. There's a tug, which is just a really nice touch.
Yeah, there's Dakotas, and there's. I liked the fact that they went to the trouble of putting in numerous different types of aircraft that were tugs, rather than just having like a stock.
Copy and paste it.
Yeah, copy and paste it, exactly.
Yeah, of course.
There weren't any Hamel cars. Didn't see any Hamel cars.
No, I didn't see any Hamel cars either, no. And also another little touch that I noticed. Did you notice that the crew that they were talking to in the Halifax were from Birmingham?
I did get the accent, yeah.
Yeah, I really like that. I thought it was just a nice little touch, because obviously that's England, I'm afraid. Everyone at that point in the war, everyone was pitching in, weren't they? So just nice to have a bit of regionalisation, I guess.
It felt a little bit empty on first watch, didn't it? The glider itself.
Yeah, the glider itself. Yeah, it was weird, because having a glider full of glider pilot regiment personnel is a bit odd to me. I'm not 100% on whether you could do that or not, but surely those guys in the back were probably more useful maybe flying a glider.
Yeah, I honestly, until you mentioned the fact that some of them were badged up, I just assumed they were glider-borne infantry.
No, they weren't, because Theo, the character John, he's got his flashes on in the briefing scene. He's got his blue Jeep glider pilot regiment tabs.
Yeah.
But then that also annoyed me more because, I mean, it's me getting into details a bit, but they don't have their army flying badges on their Denison, on the top of their Denison breast pocket on the left-hand side. and you should have that because that shows you're qualified to fly the damn thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it really annoyed me. I'm like, and then Tom Felton's character doesn't have one, which
No.
is really irritating. And I've seen photos of GPR in theatre. Some do have the badge, some don't. But I was just like, you're trying to distinguish these guys from paras. The movie sort of doesn't do enough at times because they could just be paras. I'm just like, okay, it irked me. Yeah, what those guys did is absolutely insanely brave for one, and for two, it's just how many times of a depiction have we had? Maybe 3 times, I think, probably in film. And there were Mark II Denisons, by the way, which was nice to see.
I did wonder. I mean, obviously Tom Felton's is a bit pimped. It's a bit alley.
Yeah,
It's got a little sort of sheepskin collar. It's not a Windac, because I was like, Rob, is that a Windac? And he was like, no, it's not.
It's not a Windac, no, definitely not. I thought they were trying to do, like how in RAF films everyone's wearing a Irving flying jacket with the sheepskin. Yeah. I think they're trying to do that, but with a Denison.
Okay.
So
right.
he's a pilot. I think they're trying to make it look like that.
Right, I see what you mean.
Iconography sort of thing. I've not seen any photos of guys doing that.
I did have a cursory search for sheepskin lined Denisons, and I couldn't find anything similar.
No.
But I wonder. It did occur to me that one of the things that the film does is it shows Sinclair as being quite childish in the beginning, and I think what they're trying to do with his character, we're obviously veering away from the alley tally here, but
that's fine.
We'll come back.
It's our show, Matt. We're allowed.
But I think what they're doing with his character is they're trying to show his sort of evolution towards war maturing him in a very quick manner.
I think so, yeah.
Because he's shown on his character's introduced during sort of he's getting his hours in, isn't he? Basically,
yeah, he's training over like.
And there's some ham-fisted dialogue with the tug crew where it's like, you do realize that glider pilots don't come home. And I'm like, he's trying to get his hours in to get his wings. He knows what the glider pilot regiment is.
Yeah, because he's a sergeant.
He knows the deal.
Well, he's got his badge on, so he's a qualified sergeant at that point.
He is as well, which is weird. So why is he getting his hours?
Yeah, that's what unless he's getting some refresher, is it? Time in?
I don't know, but I'm going to have to mention it. But his dad is I think he's the RAF
squadron leader. Yeah.
Yeah, played by Richard Delane. It's weird. It's so weird where they go. Tom Felton goes, well, we'll have to check with your dad to see whether you can come or not. And I that was the first part of the moment in the film where I was like, what?
Yeah, I don't get that.
There is no way in hell that is how being assigned to a glider before a major op would work. Especially
that you're a qualified pilot.
And the fact that his dad then says, no, you can't go. And then William comes out and tells Tom Felton, yeah, I can go. And Tom Felton just goes, great. It's like, that's it. None of that was needed. None of that was needed at all.
Yeah,
I don't think that
it doesn't add anything to the character either.
Yeah, exactly.
But then it comes up again later on in its own way. It comes up again where Tony Turner, Tom Felton's character's got that Luger to his head when the Germans find them in the Scheldt. I mean, it's jumping ahead a bit, but anyway, he's fumbling around with his Lee Enfield like he's never fired it before. And there's like a tiny bit of dialogue where he says, oh, I'm not a good shot. I'm not very good with this thing. And I'm like, I know you're trying to make it seem that he is the most qualified soldier in the world, because earlier you were like with his dad, I don't think you're ready for this. But you're in the glider pilot regiment.
He's a sergeant in the glider pilot regiment.
Sergeant in the glider pilot regiment. You had infantry training. You might be needed when you landed. And obviously we know Louis Hagen's story. We know Victor Miller's story. Yeah, we know these guys' stories. So, and they knew that they were trained, and they were trained as infantry. And I just think it was a little bit needless to make him seem like in that moment, seemed like he's not a qualified soldier, because you would have had the training, and that just really pissed me off. Mainly because I'm a big fan of the glider pilot regiment. I think the history is really important and interesting, and just to sort of not disparage the regiment, I guess, but to sort of just make it seem like he's not a great soldier because of whatever reason, because the plot needs to be so. It's another moment that irked me. It's just a shame.
Yeah, and that's something that comes up a couple of times, time and again throughout the film. There's little bits that you go, oh, that wasn't necessary.
Yeah. Anyway,
let's get back to some alley.
Yeah, there's a Bedford.
There's a Bedford.
About 5 seconds.
Bedford in a modern film, Robin, it isn't getting blown up.
I know, exactly. It didn't die. Is it a MWD? I think it was.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Actually, there's some decent stuff in like vehicle-wise in this film, isn't there?
There is, and that's a shame. There's Humber Scout cars.
Mhm.
There's a Daimler Dingo in there. There's a Daimler Dingo. There's a Humber Scout car. There's M3 half tracks.
Opel Blitz.
Opel Blitz. Yeah, it's one of them.
I think a Kubelwagen goes by at
Kubelwagen,
one point. Yeah.
Handley Page Halifax.
Yeah.
You mentioned before.
So there's lots of interesting sort of like vehicle stuff in there, and I think there's a lot to give the film props for, literally.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which is good. And then obviously the small arms part of it, the Bren guns, Sten guns, SMLEs and number 4s, which sort of swap between each other.
So that was one of the things that there's another one of those moments where I was like, oh, come on. So towards the end of the film, once William joins up with the Canadians.
We'll talk about that later.
He swaps back and forth between a number 1 Mark III and SMLE and a number 4 throughout the rest of the film. So I was watching it and I was just tweeting. I was like, oh, SMLE. Oh, number 4. Oh, SMLE.
Yeah, that was funny. So do you think that's because maybe the SMLEs were firing with the firing weapons and the number 4s weren't?
Interesting. I think really it's just a lack of continuity, and I think it's what they had. Because I was watching the film again before.
Or perhaps maybe that bit was shot in Lithuania and the other bit was shot in
possible. That is possible, definitely.
The guns don't translate obviously across. Perhaps.
Yeah, it depends on what the armor had on hand.
Yeah,
because there's bits on the causeway where there's guys with. I wonder if the Lithuanian parts were the bits that were filmed for the causeway parts, because
possibly
the guys
certain parts of it.
The guys have got minimal webbing on some of them. They do their best to try and hide that. There's some that don't have pouches, some that don't have. Rob will go into this in a second, I'm sure. But the Canadians they're all wearing Mark III helmets, which is great because that's always like a Canadian sort of like Canadian troops Mark III helmets because everyone associates them for some reason. But the fact is, I was talking to David Paston, and David was saying David's a retired Canadian army officer, and battlefield tour guide, so he knows about this particular campaign. Yeah, and he was saying that only the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division were issued those helmets, and the guys at the Battle of the Valkyrie Causeway were wearing Mark II helmets. The classic Brody. They've tried to be accurate with the helmets and make them look, period correct Canadian, but they've not dug deep enough apparently, and they've given them the wrong helmets. But
yeah, because that's what you were saying about the webbing. It's like no small packs, no entrenching tools, no bayonet frogs, no bayonets. It's little things like that.
They can't have bayonets because they've all got different rifles.
Oh yeah, of course that'd be a nightmare for the quartermaster, wouldn't it? But like by that point in the movie, and obviously we'll come on to it, don't worry, but like by that point in the movie, that was just starting to piss me off more and more. And I was like, come on, it's like, full webbing sets wouldn't have annoyed me if I was just enjoying the movie. I could have gone, oh, that's fine.
Well, it's a 30-minute final act crescendo of the film.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what, it's that half hour, you're right, it's that half hour end sequence that sort of just, that's where the screw for me was so loose, or I was just like, you know what, sod it, I don't care anymore. I sort of stopped caring at a point. And I think it was that bit when the Canadians were introduced, because I was like, oh, come on. I sort of paused it and I was like, really? They're going to get this amount of time in a movie about their campaign?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the Scottish troops that were involved and all the people that were involved, they're going to get half hour. I was like, really?
Well, this is it. Yeah.
And we've spent nearly an hour and a half with the Glider Pilot Regiment who weren't even at the fucking battle.
Yeah. Well, and this is something we'll talk about in a moment, but it's obviously where the aim of the writers has gotten confused somewhere, and they've tried to do whole elements in. But just to finish off the alley tally, there was a M1914 that popped up.
Panzerfaust too.
Well, oh god, yeah, we'll have to talk about that in a minute. But yeah, there was a 1914, which is a little bit, definitely would not have been present. Let's put it that way. But we did get a couple of STEM Mark IIs, no Mark IIIs.
Yeah.
And we did get, I think, 3 Brens, Mark IIIs, I think they were. I mean, we have to nitpick at these things on the alley tally because people expect it. I'm not.
Yeah, of
We're
course.
not trying to nitpick things for no reason, but
No,
just things that
that's what
we
the alley
notice.
tally's for, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what it's for. Yeah. And then one thing I know that Andy Aitchison will not let us get away with saying is that no windproof smocks either for the 52nd.
Yeah, but
Lowland lads.
whether the 52nd of the guys that we see, debatable, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. There's one officer who's got the patch on, the Lowland patch.
And he does have a Scottish accent, doesn't he?
He does, but then I think you only see him that time. They're not in it again.
Yeah, that's the only nod to them, isn't it? Really, I think.
Yeah.
So I think
bit annoying. It's a bit annoying. And then obviously, your expertise, Matt. What did you think about the Panzerfaust?
The Panzerfaust
And the T-34, which we have to add, because there's a weird little Eastern Front section.
Okay, so yeah, that's worth talking about in and of itself, isn't it? So with the with that character, what's his name? Hang on. Marinus? Yeah, we go.
Marius. Yeah.
So with Marinus's character, he's a Dutch Wehrmacht volunteer who's on the Eastern Front. And that's how we're introduced to him. We're introduced to him mid-battle. I think it's near Nerva. I think is where they it comes up in little typeface at the bottom. It explains where they are.
Yep.
Which is necessary in this film. Because it's such a jarring jump away from all the other storylines that we're now in Russia on the Eastern Front, and we are thrown straight into a battle in what looks like a Russian hamlet, which is great. That's an interesting inclusion.
Yeah.
He's introduced burying a landmine, and then he falls back to a trench, and they are packed into that trench like sardines, which is a bit inaccurate. And then we get this T-34-85, I think it is, comes in with infantry support, and they're blacking away with PPSH 41s. There's chaos in the German lines.
Yeah, ironically, the Russian troops look quite good.
That was probably filmed in Lithuania, and that's why they look spot on.
Yeah, they look decent, yeah.
And we get... That's when Marinus's character begins to see, the futility of war, where his friend Lucas gets shell-shocked and staggers forward towards the oncoming Russians and gets killed by a full burst of PPSH fire. They knock out that T-34 at close range with a Panzerfaust. I think Panzerfaust 60 is supposed to be, which is quite good. It's not a bad representation. The warhead does leave the tube a bit slow. It's like there's a bit of a lag.
Fires it like a bazooka, though, didn't he?
He does it, and there are photographs and some footage of the guys firing them over the shoulder. Obviously, when we think about Panzerfaust, we often think about them being tucked under the arm. But you could fire them over the shoulder like a bazooka. And then the next time we see him, he's in a hospital injured with shell fragments in his lung, I think. But yeah, wasn't a bad scene, other than the Germans running away from the Russians right in front of the tank.
It's a bit weird.
It's no wonder the Wehrmacht lost on the Eastern Front, is it?
Yeah.
With that kind of...
Well, that would have been like that. I think it's probably trying to say that that's when the Russians are sweeping through.
Yeah, it's that
like
the Russians are getting momentum and they're
trying to show that quick.
Exactly.
But you don't have to show it, though.
No.
It's a bit of a weird sequence. I don't think it really fits, personally.
No, and
it's just to get him out of that situation where you could have just had him turn up and go, "Where did you come from?" Well, I came from the Eastern Front.
Yeah.
Oh, great. What's happening over there? Oh, the Russians are really doing us.
Insert flashback if you want.
Yeah, if you wanted to. It's just a bit tacked on. Anyway.
Yes. So I think the best thing for us to do now is to perhaps talk a little bit about our favourite scenes.
Of course.
Hello, I'm Al Murray, and you're listening to Fighting on Film, the world's #1 war film podcast.
Favourite scene this week?
I think for me, it's the glider sequence, just for the spectacle element of it.
I mean, it's me too, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the standout, really.
I think the way that the cinematography and the CGI are done in that sequence is really good, and we'll talk about it in a second, but it's based on a little bit of truth, but it's not quite correct from what we've read.
The
formation is just coming over the coast of the Netherlands, and then they start taking flak. And the wing of the aircraft is damaged. Tom Felton's injured. The wing of the aircraft, the glider, I should say, is damaged quite badly. And there's a great shot where Henk, one of the glider pilot regiment guys, the Dutchman, is checking the status of the left wing, see how it is.
Yeah.
And the door is damaged. It flies off its hinges, and you get this.
That looks great.
Great shot of the flak going off, the damaged wing, some gliders going past. It's a really great sequence because you get that one of the tugs is on fire and it crashes through.
Yeah, like it's very like it's very reminiscent of Band of Brothers, like lift scene. It's very reminiscent of Bridge Too Far's lift. It looks, and it also it must borrow from the footage of the time that was shot by the AFPU in the horses themselves. It's really strong, but then it's sort of like is it? They didn't take that much flack from what we can gather.
No, because we looked at a couple of sources, didn't we?
I looked at Glider Pilot Regiment war diaries from the time. The only mentions of flak I found were sort of like light flak, or there was flak, but it didn't bother us. And Hagen himself in Arnhem Lift, he just mentions I think he mentions flak 3 times, but only once when he's going in, and he says it was light. And the only times he ever mentions flak after is when it's actually attacking the 3rd or 2nd lift. So I don't think they took that much heavy as flak as the movie's trying to show.
No, I mean,
unless those lads were really unlucky, which I think they probably were.
Yeah, well, I did a bit of digging. I was like, when I first watched it, I was like, did they really go over the Scheldt when on the flight path? So I looked the flight path
exactly.
up.
Yeah, how close are they?
And that was pretty much okay because they made landfall over Schuven and then went south a little bit and then north to Arnhem.
Okay.
That fits with what the film shows. And Victor Miller, in his memoir, Nothing is Impossible, which is a great read, by the way, also talks about a little bit of light flak, like Lewis Hagen does. And it's just as they're passing over the mainland, but he talks about typhoons swooping down to knock out the batteries that were firing, and it wasn't heavy. And he talks about some of the planes doing a little bit of evasive action, but he talks about how the tug wasn't doing evasive action, so he didn't have a lot of option to do evasive action. So they just went straight through it, and they were fine.
You just got to sit there until you release, don't you?
Yeah,
You've got to just do what the tug's doing.
And he doesn't mention any aircraft lost, but it is true that the lift did encounter some flak. There's 2 accounts of gliders going down near the Dutch coast. One landed in the water, and I think the guys were picked up after a short firefight.
Yes, you were showing me this account, weren't you, yesterday?
And then there was another one that landed on the shore and exchanged fire with a position that was manned by Russian conscripts.
That's it, yeah, like Russian prisoners of war.
Yeah, something like that, yeah. They were the only 2 accounts I could find of anyone crash landing. That's where the film sort of departs from fact, I think, there.
That scene is good, though. There's a lot of tension when they're trying to disengage the tow rope, but then Tom Felton goes roll the plane, and I'm like, you're in a fucking glider, mate. You're the senior officer on this Horsa. You would know you're flying a fucking Horsa. Yeah. It's just a little bit annoying.
And it's not a roll, it's a bank. They bank.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't roll.
As a spectacle in a film, it's really great. You can tell a lot of care and money was spent on that sequence alone. I just wish they'd have put the money into showing some buffaloes, which would have been useful. Because unfortunately for me, I mean, this is where we'll start the sort of what we didn't like, and it I think it for me outweighs what I did like. To put all that pomp and spectacle about Arnhem into your Scheldt film, it for me is just really odd and misplaced. Because the Canadians don't enter the picture until the 1.5-hour mark.
Yeah, the final act.
The final act, really, really like the death throes of the movie. And then they get them so... I'm not saying they don't get the Canadians wrong. They don't get the Canadians wrong. The Canadians fought an amazing battle and were really brave and stuff. But firstly, your Glider Pilot Regiment chap linked back up with the Canadians after hiding in the Scheldt for a bit. Because their whole story is just fucking needless, really. They don't do anything.
Yeah.
they don't move the plot forward. The Dutch resistance girl, the Dutch family's plot moves the plot forward. They're way more interesting about what's going on. You know, you've got the brother get shot.
I did enjoy those elements. That was my other choice was for the fave scene was the sequence where the father realizes that he has made a mistake in trusting the Germans. And I think that is a very powerful scene. And I think his character is the one that enjoys the most arc and development.
I think so.
Because he goes from being, I suppose what you could call a collaborator. He's a doctor that is...
He's just a trustworthy person, isn't he, I think? I don't think he's a collaborator.
He's just someone who's interested in helping people because he's a doctor.
Of course, yeah.
And he's worked with the Germans, so he assumes that they're reasonable people because he hasn't seen them at their worst.
Yeah, exactly.
And he pleads with the governor of the region to give his son, who threw that rocket, the Opel Blitz, and
at the start,
that ran a couple of Germans over, a prison sentence. He'll hand himself in if he isn't executed, and he takes the German officer's word at that he will give him a prison sentence. And obviously, he tortures the son is tortured quite brutally, and then he's executed. That scene's very good. I thought they showed just enough to hint at the brutality and the viciousness of that torture. And the resistance storyline is so bleak because his impetuous action over being angry that his camera has been smashed. Let's backtrack a little bit. So there's a sequence at the beginning of the film where the female character Tunja is taking photographs of the Germans as they retreat from Walcheren before they decide to dig in there. He's very naive or brash, I suppose, in taking photographs right in their face.
Yes.
And eventually a German officer takes the camera off him and throws it to the ground, breaks it.
And you get the dialogue of like, we're not leaving, we're just retreating. You're still under occupation sort of dialogue.
There's a little bit there where they're taking down a Nazi flag while the Nazis are still marching past. Which I don't think would have happened. But anyway, he's incensed that his camera's been broken, and in an act of defiance, he picks up a rock and hurls it at an Opel Blitz, which is oncoming. He hits the driver, and the driver is knocked out, and the truck careens through the German column and runs down some German soldiers, which are marching.
Yes.
And then the whole resistance plot, or the brothers' plot, revolves around: should he hand himself in? Shouldn't he? Because he's also taken photographs of some of the batteries and defences.
That's the defences,
And
so his story is quite important.
It is, and it's really interesting. So
yeah,
the opening to his story is a little ham-fisted, in my opinion. It doesn't quite work. It just seems a bit unlikely that he would be so brazen in taking photographs when he's gone out and gotten so close to the defences and managed to get decent photos.
He's got something to lose. He's got so much to lose, isn't he?
Yeah, but he's obviously, this character is supposed to be a brash young man, and he wants to do something about the Germans while he can.
Of course.
And so fast forward through that, his character is eventually, on his father's advice, he does surrender, and he's tortured and gives up members of the Dutch resistance, which is a bleak but really important storyline, because that's the sort of thing that happened.
Of course.
That's one of the more powerful elements of the film.
And he gets shot on the coastline there.
He does, and Marinus is one of the guys that is in the firing detail.
Yeah, and that's where it starts, sort of like the characters coming together sort of thing happens. It's the first time it happens in the movie. I got behind that storyline because the characters had more to lose. Obviously, if the girl got found out after that point, the whole village could be killed through reprisals.
That's where I felt the film was going to put its weight, but then it jumped back.
Yeah, and exactly. And then this is where the Glider Pilot Regiment guys come back in. And looking back after, maybe after the weekend, I sort of went through some of the scenes again. I think, they're just stories just doesn't make sense.
No.
They're so bold and brash about going through the Scheldt itself, going into houses and things and not lying low. They get drunk at night, make loads of fucking noise. And I'm thinking, you are trained Glider Pilot Regiment soldiers. You're behind enemy lines as it is. You're not where you're meant to be. and you know that you know information about the biggest airborne operation going on a few hours away.
Yeah.
If you get captured, that whole operation is, this is all I was thinking during, like, if they get captured, then Market Garden's fucked because they could get tortured and stuff and found out. But no, their whole element is, we need to get back to here because we want to get back to the Canadians. And I'm like, okay, but why? Why is their story important at all?
Well, it isn't.
It's not. And the only reason I can fathom is that they've put the GPR in and Arnhem in is because, obviously for a Dutch audience, Market Garden's going to be a much bigger touchstone for the audience, sort of like.
Yeah, for Dutch and international audiences. Yeah, definitely.
Exactly. But it doesn't really fit your movie about the Scheldt. You're calling it the Forgotten Battle or the Battle for the Scheldt or whatever.
Well, they've forgotten the battle.
Exactly. The Battle of the Scheldt was only half hour. And then that's where the issues begin to me. Once the Canadians come in, I think I mentioned it earlier, time stamped it. It's about an hour and 25 minutes.
Well, it's a 2 hours, 7-minute film.
And I was thinking, hang on a minute. No, they're not doing this now, are they? I was like, really? That's where it really just... And this is another point as well. I mean, we're probably in final thoughts because this is all final thoughts. But like the trailer... And I didn't watch the trailer beforehand, before watching it. I'm pleased that I didn't.
Yeah, you saw the original one a year ago, right?
The original one. I didn't watch the Netflix one that everyone was going mad about. I rewatched that this morning, and I saw it, and I was like, "That's not the movie. That's not the movie that we got."
No.
And it's trying to be like, 3 people interconnected by war and all that sort of thing. But the way the trailer's cut, and obviously I know trailers are cut to make them look something that they're not anyway, but the trailer makes it look like a solid war film. About the Battle of the Scheldt with the gliders in. And I wish, and my brain watching the trailers like, well, hang on, there's gliders in that Scheldt film. What the fuck?
I know. Well, this is it. I wandered off my point a little bit, but what some of my favourite scenes were the underground, the resistance scenes where
agreed.
She's having to decide how can she help save her brother. She thinks that by withholding the photographs he's taken from the resistance, they might be able to rescue him. It's a vain hope. And eventually and
that's far more interesting.
It is. And she's eventually involved in telling the Canadians how to get across the causeway and outflank the Germans.
Exactly.
Which is something we'll come back to in a second. I just thought there was a lot of character development and arc that was interesting in and of itself within that resistance arc. You mentioned it earlier that the glider pilot arc of the film isn't really necessary. I feel like it was a film that was too long for what it was, and that it was too short for what it could have been. It could have been a 4 to 6 sort of limited series about the Netherlands in World War II. You could have had your resistance plot. You could have had your glider pilot regiment plot with a little bit of an Arnhem story. Perhaps it was,
you could have had
one of the gliders that crashed and was, captured shortly after they crash landed on the coast. And then you could have had your Commonwealth Canadian element in another episode, or intertwined, or however you wanted to do it. I feel like what they've done is they've perhaps written a limited series, and then someone has gone, we're going to make it a film.
Yeah, perhaps. And I keep bringing it up, but the glider pilot guys would be far better served, their story would be far better served in Arnhem.
Yes.
Telling the story of the glider pilot regiment in Arnhem, and you'd be much better served in this film telling the story of the bloody Canadians in the 52nd Lowland who were actually involved in the battle. And the way the movie ends, I mean, getting ahead of ourselves again, but the way the movie ends, it makes it look like that estuary battle across that causeway was the Scheldt itself. And
that was the entirety of that operation.
Whereas of course it wasn't.
It was a multiple sort of island operation, and Infatuate was the operation that finally captured Walcheren and opened up the Scheldt.
Of course.
But the thing about that end sequence with the causeway is obviously they've compressed it to within half an hour, and in doing so they've minimized the number of Canadian troops involved and the involvement of the 52nd Lowland Division.
And I think they've minimized the importance of the battle after the start of the movie says how important it is.
Well, you know what?
They diminished the reasons for it all.
Before they got to the causeway, I thought they were just going to do that classic thing where they tell the story of getting to the battle but not showing the battle.
Right.
I thought that was possibly what they were going to do. And I was a little bit relieved that they did show the Battle of Walcheren Causeway, because that's the opening
It's the
to
opening
those
act, sort
5
of,
days. Yeah, it's the opening to those 5 days of fighting that eventually saw the island liberated. Should we discuss how the battle actually sort of progressed?
You just quickly give a context there, quick for everyone listening who might not be clued up.
On the 31st of October, the Canadian 2nd Infantry Division was hoping to sort of bounce across into Walcheren and take the island quickly. They didn't know what the resistance level was going to be, so they mounted an attack across. That wasn't successful, and then successive battalions sent companies forward. So there were 3 principal Canadian battalions involved. There were the Black Watch of Canada, which is the battalion which is portrayed in the film. There was a company from the Calgary Highlanders that went in. Then there was Le Régiment de Maisonneuve, who the Maisies, who sent. They were from the 5th Canadian Infantry Division, and they were one of the battalions that got across the causeway and clung onto a small beachhead on the other side. That's something that the film doesn't actually show. It just shows sort of they can't cross the causeway. They can't get across. They're stuck at that midway point where the Germans blew the road, which is exactly what happened, and that's accurate. And a lot of the accounts from the battle talk about how men sheltered it in that hole in the causeway, and that was the reason they couldn't get armor across, armor vehicles and tanks, etc., to support the infantry.
Yeah.
So it was an infantry battle. They crossed what was like 40 yards wide with water on either side to get to the other side of the causeway. And at that point, the Germans had every inch of that causeway dialed in with mortars, which isn't shown in the film. We're just shown an 88 flak gun that was firing straight down the causeway, which is apparently accurate. There was an anti-tank gun. It might have been a Pak 40 or an 88. I don't know, but there was a gun that was firing straight down the causeway, obviously envisaging tanks coming along. They've kind of distilled that battle down in and of itself that you could make an entire film about the Battle of
This is the biggest rub, isn't it? Where that whole battle of the causeway there and the Scheldt battle is just summed up in half an hour. With your principal character who shouldn't even be there.
The way that the impasse was broken, elements of the 52nd Lowland Division, Glasgow Highlanders, the Cameroonians, they crossed the I think it's called the slough, which is the marsh that the causeway cut in half between the two islands, and they managed to outflank the German positions surrounded the beachhead, and then the Glasgow Highlanders managed to push through. And at the same time, you've got Operation Infatuate, which is Royal Marine Commandos coming ashore at Flushing and elsewhere along the coast. You've got Buffaloes coming in and LCAs, and they took the island in like a combined arms attack. The only reason they went across the causeway is they thought they'd be able to bounce across and get in quickly. Of course. That wasn't to be. So you don't get any of that nuance within that because they just don't have the time.
No. See, I was like, is this going to be a movie set in the Scheldt area, but not about the Scheldt battle? And it's going to be called The Forgotten Battle because it's a forgotten group of men from the Glider Pilot Regiment who just so happened to crash there. But no, then the movie goes, oh no, hang on, it is about the Canadians. Wait a minute, we've got half an hour to spare. We better shove them in and get our guy from the Glider Pilot Regiment to meet up with them. And I was like, okay, cool. So maybe he's going to leave now. But no, they go, oh, I'll get you a uniform. And I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah, that was another one of those moments where you go, what?
I was really upset about that.
That whole sequence where he arrives back, he climbs off the scout car. He's wandering through the Canadian company HQ. Some random Canadian private, also called William, turns to him and says, "You're all right?" And he goes, "Yeah." And then he gives him a light for a ciggy. And then he's like, "Let's get you a new uniform and some food." It's like, you're a private. Why are you getting? You would just take him to the your commanding officer and go, "Oh, we got a glider pilot regiment lad here. He needs to go back to the UK or back to wherever. There's another lift that needs to be taken in, perhaps. Who knows? Because at this point...
Yeah, well, it's like work out what he's doing here and send him back.
At this point, you have no idea of the chronology that the film is trying to portray. Because the Battle of the Scheldt and the Battle of Walcheren Causeway began on October 31st. Arnhem's first lift was on the...
17th?
Of September? Yeah, it's a whole month before. So
yeah, exactly.
You don't get any sort of inkling from the film that any more than like 2, 3, 4 days have passed.
That's what it feels like. That's what it feels like. And that is really egregious as well.
And it's such a time dilation. And it's something that films are obviously going to be guilty of time to time, especially war films.
But it could have just had a little bit of text at the bottom. You know, bottom third going like 3 weeks later.
Yeah.
He bumps into the Canadians. I would have been able to go, okay, fair enough then. Because at least you're...
Maybe that was something that was lost in the edit.
Oh, I don't know. But then for him just to so happily...
Well, the result is it does make sense.
Just to happily rebadge up as Canadians and go in on that battle.
Yeah, get rid of your Denison with your flying wings.
That you've worked so fucking hard to get your army flying wings. Fucking make the conscious choice to be in that regiment, and you work fucking hard for it. And those guys were super fucking proud of what they did. It just diminishes the regiment a little bit. And I thought it was really unfair, and it's unfair to the Canadians as well.
I just thought it was very unlikely the way they scripted that part. Yeah.
And I think it's where the movie really fell down for me, because I just stopped caring after that point.
I know what you mean.
And then when they all meet up at the end, it felt really forced.
Yes. So the three remaining characters meet up. The sister who's now in the Resistance, that was trying to get the plans to the Allies. She's captured because she puts the plans in a boat and pushes her friend who's been wounded across, who's picked up, and the plans are finally found. I looked into that. I couldn't find any sort of accounts that verified that was something that actually happened. There is like one brief mention of it on Wikipedia, but there isn't a direct citation for that point that it makes, where it talks about Resistance telling the Canadians that there was a tidal path that they could get boats through within the slough, which is the tidal marsh. So that part I couldn't find any sort of confirmation for.
No.
But this is it. Like it seems that they've managed to get all three in at the same place. The Canadians finally cross, and it's shown as being Canadians rather than members of the 52nd Lowland that make the crossing.
Yeah, Caledonian Regiment, weren't
they? Cameroonians, yeah.
Camerons, yeah.
And they cross over and they outflank the Germans. And that is when William and Baroness meet each other in a wheat field at gunpoint. It's a Mexican standoff.
It is a bit,
it's a Netherlands standoff. And it's just so forced. There's so little likelihood of these two characters meeting one another.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
They let each other go, and Baroness runs off towards the Russian, towards the German HQ.
might as well have. It wouldn't have surprised me if it had turned up in Eastern Europe after that.
Well, how did he get back to the Netherlands so quickly from the Eastern Front?
A train. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway,
horseback, probably known the Wehrmacht.
Well, that's it. There's very, very few horses in this film.
I know. But that's the endemic of any portrayal of the Wehrmacht, isn't it?
During that retreat scene at the beginning, there should have been a fuck ton of horses.
Horses and carts. Yeah, it would have been nice, wouldn't it? Yeah. And that's the issue. I think that's the wider problem for me, Matt, is that because I didn't enjoy the movie, I was nitpicking on it way more. And I know there's movies that we've covered that have been way less accurate for the show, but we've given a free ride because we enjoyed the movie as a movie.
I agree.
And we enjoyed the narrative and the plot. And when you don't, unfortunately, I sit there, I know a lot of other people probably do as well, and they start to pull away at everything and overanalyze everything.
Yeah.
Because you're not enjoying it.
Why are those 25-pounders still limbered while they're firing?
Yeah, exactly.
Why haven't they opened fire before now? Why are they only firing when the Canadians are retreating? In actuality, they'd laid out an entire fire plan.
Yeah.
There was tanks and 25-pounders firing. There was smoke screens. There was Vickers machine guns laying down indirect fire barrages on German positions.
I know.
All sorts covering that attack across the causeway. We don't get any of that.
See what I mean? And that's where maybe it's budget restraints. I know 14 million is quite a big budget, but it's not Hollywood standards, stuff like that. But I think at the end of the day, I mean, for my final sort of thing, I just didn't enjoy it as a movie on the whole, because it was trying to do too much and it couldn't pick who it really wanted to be its main star or its main character. And it did have that Dunkirk thing where and when I watch Dunkirk again and whenever I see it, I'm like, well, I don't really care about anyone in the end because there's too many people crammed in.
True.
Anyway,
it's a little bit grating that the two members of the party, the glider pilot guys, John and I forget the other chap's name, the character's name.
What, Tom Felton's?
No, the other chap that was in the back of the glider. Nigel, I think. They just disappear.
Yeah. They just go.
They talk about surrendering, and then one morning they've disappeared.
That's it. Off they get drunk. Yeah,
and that's part of Williams maturing throughout the film, where he's like, "No, we're not going to surrender," and it's that, and he's becoming a bit of a leader, but then he has no one to lead.
No, exactly.
And then at the end, and this is one of the things,
he's reduced to the rank of a private in about 2 seconds.
Exactly.
And doesn't
this
care.
is one of the things that struck me at the end of the film was he goes through all this evolution. By the end of it, he isn't leading anyone. He isn't interacting. He doesn't say anything. He's just a private soldier that's been thrust into this attack along the causeway. And then the film does a fantastic job of showing the chaos of that battle and the mud and the dirt and the blood. I got the atmosphere from it.
Yeah.
Not everything was accurate about it. The P-14 that popped up.
Of course, yeah.
SMLEs.
But it does it far too late and too quickly.
The 25-pounders that were all limbered. Those are nitpicks. But I think what happens with the film is it suffers from trying to do too much, but not hitting the right balance amongst all of the characters.
Yeah. Seriously, just edit out the glider pilot regiment, guys. And I think you probably have a better film. Well, because they don't work. They feel forced.
Yeah, as I was saying earlier, it would have made a great mini-series with Arnhem Glider Pilot Regiment, Canadians, Dutch resistance, some other aspects of the war in the Scheldt that we don't know about, and the wider
would have been good
Dutch campaign. But
I mean, really, to probably sum up, it's a well-meaning film.
Yes,
but for me and you, I just don't think it worked. And that's probably the first time we've probably been sort of unanimous on a movie, I think.
I mean, I loved the mise-en-scène. I loved the flooded villages, the flooded fields, the mud of the battle, the atmosphere of the town hall, the Eastern Front Hospital, the mise-en-scène, the set dressing was great. The cinematography was pretty solid. I felt, it felt dynamic. And it was a bold idea. It's a multifaceted approach looking at multiple characters, but it just wasn't carried off as well as it could have been.
No.
And they were clearly just cramming too much in. But I think, for Dutch cinema and war remembrance, I think it's significant and well worth watching. Some of the dialogue was a little bit ropey, with like one of the guys shouts fire for effect at a Bren gunner.
Watch it in the original dub, maybe not with the overdubbed Dutch actors. They overdub them. Netflix does that thing where it does like a
I saw a couple of people saying that, and I did watch it the second time with the subs, and it was better. But those bits were obviously they were the Canadian parts of the film,
of course, yeah.
But as I say, in terms of Dutch cinema and remembrance of the war and cultural memory in the Netherlands and in broader Europe and internationally, I think it's important because it's a battle that is forgotten, and despite the film largely forgetting a lot of aspects of the battle, exactly, it does raise, it does that thing that we always talk about on the pod. It makes people go, oh,
it raises awareness.
It does. This is a part of the war I didn't know about, and I saw a number of tweets under the Forgotten Battle tag on social media where people were like, I didn't even know about this. I'm going to go away and look it up.
Good. Well, if it does that, then it does something. I mean, that's one of our things we do say about the war film genre now. It needs to do more work to sort of preserve and things as it's going forward. So if that does that, then great. I just think it's a movie for me this week. I just didn't get me.
It's number 4 in the UK on Netflix right now.
I know it is.
So it's done well.
Exactly.
and it's reached an audience.
Will do
And I
well.
think that is it's a bonus.
Mm.
I think that is the main thing that this film is going to do. It's going to reach an audience, and while it doesn't tell the story that we expected it to tell, and perhaps doesn't tell it in the detail or the depth that we would
The
like,
manner, yeah.
the manner that we'd like, I think it does sort of raise awareness, and that's a positive.
Well, there you go. We salvaged something from nothing there. That probably wraps up for today. It's out there. It's on Netflix right now. It's easily watchable this week, which we can't say about many of the films we cover, which is quite nice. Yeah, so if you haven't seen The Forgotten Battle and you want to, it is on Netflix. And as always, you can like, share, subscribe to the pod, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, support us on Patreon, and get involved in the Twitter and the Facebook chat. We always love to hear from you. And next week is our AMA episode for our first anniversary, and we're really looking forward to it. We've
Super excited.
We've got some great questions.
We have already, and if you have any, hit us up on social media. We've put posts up about it. Leave us a question, or you can reach us via our website, www.fightingonfilm.com. We have a contact page on there. You can leave a question there too.
Yeah, and thanks to all the new patrons that have joined this month. It's really nice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's really great. It makes just makes running the show that little bit easier, covering some of the domain hosting. And if we ever get any wacky ideas, it means we've got the budget to sort of see them through. So it's really, really nice. Yeah, thank you. And we'll catch you again next week.
Thanks for listening, guys. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.